right, everyone, welcome on into another episode of the Dynamic Leaders Podcast. If this is your first time, welcome. If this is not your first time, welcome back. Thank you for listening. If you have the time right now, please leave a rating and a review for the episode. It's a great way for other leaders to find the podcast. Jamie and I, my co-hosts, we do as good a job as we can trying to spread the word, but one of the best ways for other people outside of our networks to find this show is if you leave a rating and review. So if you have the time, hit pause, pull over, do whatever you have to do to be safe and leave a quick review. It really helps out the show and we'd really appreciate that. But I do have my co-host, Jamie Hoffman, here with me. And Jamie, today we're going to start with one big win each. I'll start with my one big win. We took a week off to celebrate the holiday and get some time with family and friends. And I am going to say that my big win is that I actually got to do a lot of that. It's not too often, especially during the pandemic, that we got a lot of free time, my wife and I, and this was a really great Labor Day weekend. And even into this week, I'm still at the beach as we're recording this, getting a lot of relaxing time. I'm working, but being able to get some additional beach time after the weekend, and just was so great on Labor Day weekend, having family here, just laughing, having a good time. We watched Penn State football win their first game of the season, so that was a lot of fun too. And definitely a big win to get down here to the beach, just relax as much as possible. My daughter's getting a lot of time with her grandma, Nook, as we call her, and definitely a big win for me. How about you? What's going on with you, Jamie?
I also had a nice relaxing weekend, so I understand that it's a huge, huge win. I feel the most rested I've felt in a long time, and I hope you feel the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as my big win for the week, one of the things I'm most excited about is I officially onboarded someone to take over some of my marketing and social media, which is a huge step for me because that is something I really actually enjoy doing. And so I was really hesitant to give someone else, the ability to help me out there. I was like very stubborn about letting go of the control. But I just don't have the time, and people aren't paying me to post on Instagram. They're paying me to work with their dogs. So if I needed to free up some time, that was a good way to do it. And I actually just onboarded my cousin, who is doing a lot of marketing in the real estate space, but she's really excited about my company, and she has been amazing. So I'm super pumped about that. And it feels like such a big win because it was like so tough for me. And hopefully now I'll still pop in and do some social media. I'll still be in the DMs and I'll still kind of create content when I can. But it is freeing up a lot of time for me.
Big win for sure. And that is, for those who don't know, the original reason, I guess the original spot that Jamie and I connected on was because of social media marketing help. And Jamie kind of helped me with that with the Leadership Academy way back when. So it's hilarious. As she knows, I am the complete opposite. I was like totally ready to give it up. And it's like, I hate it. I don't want anything to do with it. Whereas Jamie is obviously really good at it, as you've seen from the Leadership Academy. And if you haven't already followed her, for her own business, but that's super cool, and really cool that you get to keep it in the family too.
Yes, very, very excited. I knew that was going to be funny bringing it up. I was like, yep, I'm completely going away from that, but I'm going to that.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. Well, we're going to get into our episode here. The featured guest for today's episode is with Meredith Albertson, who is the Chief Marketing Officer, Meredith, of Stratifyd, a SaaS startup in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. And before we get to Meredith's episode, Jamie and I wanted to talk about leaders who inspire us. And this came about because I actually got an opportunity to work with Meredith. I was contracting at Stratifyd. Meredith was not my direct boss, but I did have many interactions with her. I hired a bunch of people for her marketing team. And as I was telling Jamie offline here, one of the best things that came out of that was just remembering how much people can indirectly inspire you. So like, even if they're not your hands-on boss or the person that you directly report to, how much of an impact they can have. And maybe, think about other people who have either directly or indirectly inspired me, from a leadership standpoint. And I think the obvious ones that stand out are my parents. didn't know it as much growing up, but definitely as I get older, and now that I'm a parent and can kind of see the parallels between things that they did and the decisions that I'm having to make with my daughter. Those are the two obvious ones that really stand out that have inspired me. That was obviously a really direct impact there. Indirectly, though, I had a lot of heroes growing up. I really bought into a lot of like the legendary mystique, I guess, of people that came before social media, came before TV. Like John Kennedy comes to mind as one of those people. And yeah, I know Kennedy got assassinated. There's video of it, but it was largely before television really took off. Abraham Lincoln is one of those people as well. Just someone who was a leader in like the darkest time of our country's history. And I know that like has nothing to do with my life, but like the way he conducted himself and the way that he treated people, that was always something that stood out to me, that you should just, treat people really well. So there's just been so many people. I don't want to go on a tangent here because I'll let Jamie talk about other people who have inspired her, but I think it's a really good realization just to know that there are people out there, and even if you don't get a chance to directly work with them, they could really inspire you to do better, to be a better person. And I think that's something really special. I think Meredith has that, and you'll all get to hear that in a second. But before we get to Meredith, Jamie, who are a few people that have inspired you in your life?
Like you, I thought of some examples that were both indirect and direct. I actually read an article, I think this past week, about the founder of Bumble, and I had no idea about her history, but she was actually, she was the vice president of marketing at Tinder before she founded Bumble. And she actually had a sexual harassment case and left Tinder because of that and started Bumble. And I just was so inspired reading her story, just taking such a terrible situation and then building the second most popular dating app. I know my brother met his fiance on Bumble. I have so many friends who met their, lifelong partners on Bumble, and we all have her to thank, right? And I love the platform. It's really designed to kind of prevent sexual harassment and harassment of any type, because women have to reach out to the male first, which is something I think, puts us in a really interesting, role, which we usually don't have, is, reaching out first. But I think that is a really smart way to do things. And they actually went public, and she became the youngest woman to take a company public. So that to me is so incredible. And I'm really, really inspired by her story. Obviously, I don't know her personally, but that is someone that I look up to now and have read a little bit more. And I'm really excited to kind of watch where she takes everything. And she mentors other female entrepreneurs. So she just seems like a very well-rounded leader. And the other person that comes to mind, and I hate to put you on the spot here, but it's really you, Colin. I was thinking about it. And, this is kind of perfect segue, because you'd mentioned, how you and I connected, which was really over me helping you with some of the marketing for Talent 409. And I loved kind of your goal and mission with the company. And so I was really excited to be on board and help you out and be a part of it. And through that process, I had mentioned that I also wanted to start my own company. I was working on a company before I left New York and before COVID, and now started something different with the puppy training. But you have supported me every step of the way. I still got to help you out. And even when I said like, hey, I don't have as much time, it was never, you never punished me for that, or you were never upset. It was always, you encouraged exactly what I wanted to do, and you've supported it. And that is something that I admire so much and want to take in to my company as the leader. And I've kind of had the opportunity to do that. My first contractor, she is starting a dog walking company. And I know she was really surprised when I was like, oh, well, how can I support you? I want to see that succeed. This is, we can work together. This can be a very symbiotic relationship. And I've learned so much from you over the past year, and I really, really appreciate it. You have been a huge, huge inspiration and a huge, supporter of everything that I've been doing. And that's why I'm so excited to co-host this podcast and get to speak with you more. And yeah, even when I was like, I'm starting my own thing, I don't have a lot of time, you're like, oh, well, do you want to do this with me? And knowing that I came from a background of acting, and I've hosted for nonprofits and certain things like that. And it really means a lot. So thank you so much for everything, but you have really been a very inspiring leader. And I don't take that for granted.
Well, I am mostly speechless. I will say that in no way did I force Jamie to just say what she just did. So this is
I had no idea that was coming. Yeah. Disclaimer.
this is a surprise to me, and just thank you. I do really appreciate it, and I'm sure I'll be able to formulate my words better when I have some time to. I'll listen to this during the edit, but it's a two-way street. I mean, you're really great with your communication, and it was always clear, what you wanted to do, and it's just up to me. How can I help you get there? And I'm hopeful we've been able to stay connected for over a year now, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that in the future and be able to support each other. But it's just really cool to hear you also kind of take on that that type of leadership too, because I know it's probably not the norm. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back or anything, but I just think it's really cool that now you've been able to, with contractors that you've had, just been able to extend that lending hand and be able to help out, and hopefully more people will be able to do that and be inspired by you now taking that lead. So thank you again, Jamie. I appreciate that. And I don't think there's a better way to segue into this episode. So we are just going to call it that. Thank you for tuning in to this first part of the show. Stay tuned for the conversation with Meredith Albertson. We are back next week with another episode, so stay tuned for that. And Jamie and I will talk to you then. Okay, everyone, I am here today with Meredith Albertson, Chief Marketing Officer at Stratifyd, former senior manager, former director, former VP. You've had a number of, at least from a title perspective, leadership type roles, Meredith. And I want to hit you with the hard question to start our conversation today, because I think you're a phenomenal leader. And I would just love if you can tell us a little bit about how you got into a leadership position, and was that something that you always aspired to do?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your kind words to start off with. It's interesting. I think naturally I always tended to lean into leadership opportunities. Whether that was not that I've always been the best leader. I definitely have learned a tremendous amount throughout growing up and just my career. But whether it was captain of sports teams or even when I was lifeguarding, that first job out of school, I kind of set that goal the next summer. I'm going to be the manager of all the lifeguards next summer. Even to my role now. So I think I've leaned into it. I've kind of thrived in that environment. Interestingly enough, though, I think that it's also naturally tied to a lot of promotions, this concept of leadership and management. And I've always been very, career oriented, goal oriented, and set those, milestones in my own career. And I think, one day I was promoted and put in this job, and it's like, hey, you're going to manage these people. And I was excited, but at the same time, I was like, wow, do I really know what I'm doing here? But as I got into it, it became much more than just the promotion. I really started to fall in love with that opportunity to not only impact the business, which is why you're kind of brought into these roles, but it became more about the opportunity to impact your people's lives, the people that are kind of relying on you for that leadership. It was about coaching them. It was about helping them navigate tricky situations. It was helping them, take the next step in the career, whether it was with, the company you're currently with or beyond. And that just became a really powerful thing for me. It was a way to make more than just an impact to the business, but more of an impact to individuals' lives. And that was just, I don't know, I fell in love with it. And so for me, it became less about promotions and more about opportunities to coach and to lead and to really help people move forward in different areas of their own career paths.
And so one of the interesting things that you mentioned is just being very career oriented, motivated, and wanting to do well. First, can we start with where that motivation comes from? Like, why do you push so hard? Why do you want to accomplish so much?
Oh, geez. I think actually my mom and dad, both of them always growing up, there was never anything that I couldn't accomplish. There was never a goal that they looked at me and said, you can't achieve that. You can't do that. So being really having that supportive family. And then I think great role models and leadership along the way, back to my cheerleading coaches, my dance team coach in college, even my third grade teacher, Mrs. Chancer, who is still my favorite teacher of all time that I've ever had. And if she's listening, I love you, Mrs. Chancer. There was never anything I couldn't accomplish. And they really helped me believe in myself and believe in that ability to do whatever that was.
Yeah, that's really cool. And great shout out for that teacher too. Really impactful, obviously, to have somebody that young in life and really carry over. Now, again, having that type of personality that you do, especially in your work, do you think that's helped you in your leadership roles? Like, do you think having that type of personality, that type of work ethic helps you kind of like elevate everyone else's work ethic? Or, do sometimes you feel like resistance from people to be like, whoa, I don't want to work quite as hard as you do. Like, I don't have those aspirations to move up the ladder like you did.
There's a great book that I read, and I think it's a great book for a lot of people to read, called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And she introduces this concept of rock stars and superstars. Superstars are these people that need to be constantly challenged. They are looking for promotion. They want to have that path forward. They're typically more the people that are going to be your people managers. And then there are your rock stars, your people. They're solid as a rock. They aren't looking for that next big challenge, but they want to hone their craft and be the best that they possibly can be at their, that individual area of contribution. And I think that is really important, to not only identify people on your team that maybe are rock stars or superstars, but also make sure that you have career paths for both of them, so that there is opportunities for success for both of those types of people. I also think that leads you into how you're planning your team, how you're setting up your team. No, if I had an entire team full of type A personalities like myself, nobody would get anything done. It would be, working craziness. And you need to, when you're building out your teams, there needs to be a sense of balance. You need those individual contributors. You need those rock stars. You also need those superstars. And I think that that's just incredibly important, that when you're hiring and you're building out your teams, that you are really thinking about those things. Because, sometimes I need people to pull me back a little bit too. It's not always 100 miles an hour, 24 hours a day. My husband balances me out very well and kind of, knows how to pull me back.
Yeah, I think that balance part is a really big highlight that I'm glad you brought up. And I just have one more related question to this, and then I promise we'll move on. But I'm curious, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but you talked about creating roles that maybe aren't just in management or leadership type positions, but advancement opportunities for people who are killing it in their individual contributor type roles. How do you do that from like an organizational standpoint? Like, is it, you just got to rely on people who are higher up like you to have that foresight to be able to do those things? Or can, someone who's maybe at the associate level or someone at a lower level position, can they come to a person like you and say like, hey, here's a growth path that I'm thinking about. It's not traditional, but is this something that we can do? Or can we talk about this? Like, again, I don't know if there's an answer to this, but I'm really curious.
Well, first and foremost, I do think it is a responsibility of leaders within a company or people that are managing teams, that we make it a priority. A lot of companies I've been a part of this myself, but they naturally think the only way to promotion is management. And I have worked with some amazing individual contributors that have just been so great at what they do, but managing people was not in their wheelhouse. It wasn't even something they were really interested in being a part of. And that is completely okay. The world doesn't need, hundreds and millions of managers. We need people to be in all different parts. And so I think that it's really important that we as leaders and even companies recognize that the path to promotion does not always mean that you have to manage people. You're going to end up setting up a team that's going to be really frustrated. And then that person you just promoted is now going to feel like they are failing because they're not set up for success. And that, I think, really falls back on us. So I think, again, you've got to really find those ways to build those career paths for both of those groups. The other element is, as well as I think individuals can be their own best advocates. You've got to be your own cheerleader. You've got to be willing to articulate, to whether it's your boss or your boss's boss, or even just someone who you have tapped to help be your champion within an organization. Or these are the things that I am very interested in doing. How do you suggest, how can I move forward? How can I find things that are going to help amplify this and get me more experience? I'll give you an example. I mean, I made several years ago was managing a young woman who I think the absolute world of. And one of our first meetings together when I started managing her was like, all right, we're going to start planning out how we get you promoted, how we start getting you to the next step, how we start working to build you a team. And I was excited. And I looked over at her and she didn't quite seem as excited as I did, but I was, oh, maybe she's nervous. Walked away from the meeting. I was feeling like, great, I've helped her. And then she ended up coming up to me the next day and saying, while I really appreciate that, it's not really what I want to do. I want to be really, really great at my skill set and what I'm going after and impacting the business, but managing people in that path that you laid out for me, that's not really what's going to make me happy. And I felt horrible in the moment, but was so thankful because it's a lesson that I've taken with me, moving forward in my career, that I need to be better about really listening to what the team wants and what the team needs. But I also really, her bravery for telling her new boss that wasn't really the path that she wanted to go. That's the kind of thing that I think people need to, to be able to have that their own voice and be able to articulate really, what are the things they enjoy.
Yeah, I love that. And I really appreciate, again, sharing a very specific and detailed story, because I think that's probably something, if we haven't experienced it, or if you haven't experienced it, the listener, maybe it's happening, or you're going to experience it at some point. So just being able to recognize, like you said, maybe listen a little bit more to the actual needs, I think is important. So then if we're talking to the individual contributors who do want to take that leap into leadership, I'm sure this is something that you've done before with people that you work with, maybe people that you mentor outside of work. But if they're looking to make that step and they haven't gotten that experience, but it's something that they feel they need to get in order to, get that type of role or to get that recognition, like, what would you say? Like, how would you help someone who's not in the people leadership position, wants to get there, but doesn't have the hands-on experience? Like, are there books, are there resources? Is there volunteer opportunities maybe?
Oh gosh, there's hundreds and hundreds of books I'm sure that anybody can read on this topic that may be better than the advice I have to give. But I think there's a number of things you can do. I think, going back to your last question, I think that it's very important that people be comfortable and be brave to articulate to their boss or, again, someone in the company with really what they're looking for. So I think bringing that to their attention of, hey, this is a role that I want. It's, not today, not tomorrow, but it's something I'm really working towards. And I want to get those opportunities for leadership and people management experience. I think that you've got to be able to be comfortable in articulating that. But I think there's also maybe not the traditional ways to get experience that you may already be doing or you may not even be thinking about. So can you ask your supervisor to manage a project? take a leadership role on managing a project from, brainstorming, conception, all the way through to the end, and reporting on those results? Can you volunteer to maybe run a team meeting, every once in a while? Can you volunteer to maybe start managing some of the interns? A lot of companies have internship programs. Those interns want to get a lot of value, but sometimes it's so many things going on that they don't really have anyone they can go to talk to. So I think, that's a great opportunity for somebody to step in and volunteer to manage interns. I also think even outside of the office, and this is really regardless of your age, I think there's always mentorship opportunities. If you've just graduated from school, you're a year or two into your professional career, reach back out to your alma mater. Is there somebody that's looking for a mentor? Is there, something you can do in that field? But again, I think, those are some of the things that I would start to look at, because I think those will all start to give you the skill set, but also the confidence that when those opportunities really do come up, that you've got things to point to, and you'll really feel confident.
Yeah. And I think you're pointing out that there are a lot of opportunities within work, like you talked about, that you can either create or ask to be a part of, whether it's lead a team meeting, mentor interns, etc. But there's probably a lot outside of work. Like I think about, there's this episode of Family Matters of all TV shows where the wife, she is out of work. I can't remember the exact reason why she's out of work, but or maybe it's at the place that she's working currently, and she's looking to take a leadership promotion, and she gets denied. And she goes home and she's talking about it with the family, and they're like, no, you're the best leader we know. Like, you take care of all of us. Like you do. And so she like storms back into the guy's office and, says her piece, and it's a sitcom. Like, she gets the job and it all ends all happy and everything. But yeah, I tend to think about that all the time. Like, there's probably a lot of things in our day-to-day lives that we do that are very leadership centric that maybe we just don't even recognize or give ourselves the credit for, to say, like, if we're in an interview setting and someone says, okay, well, tell me about some of your leadership experience. And you're like, oh crap, well, I'm not a CEO. I'm not a CMO. Like, what can I say? Maybe think about some of those things. I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that, but that might be something I'm thinking of too.
Oh, 100%. I think that we all fall into this, habit of thinking that there's a very, black and white description of what exactly qualifies as leadership experience. But if you've volunteered at your local SPCA and you have managed volunteers, or you have developed a project or a schedule, or you've led a committee, there's just so many different things out there that, to your point, that we do just outside of the office that really do lend itself to that type of experience. I do think we often fall into the traps, especially in an interview, where we forget about those things. We immediately kind of go to the resume and we're like, what is the actual practical work experience? But it goes way beyond that. And I do think it's important that you have those types of stories to share as examples, in an interview or when you're talking to your supervisor about a promotion. Yeah, absolutely. So I have gushed quite often about the way that I think of you as a leader and the way that you go about leading your team at Stratifyd. And so I want to run through some questions that are related to that and get a little bit more insight into how you go about leading these teams. And the first question I have, and I think this is, again, the hardest of maybe these few questions that I'm going to ask you, but how do you keep your team engaged? And I'll throw in the fact that we work for a remote company. And so they're post, pandemic or relative normal, whatever we're calling this world that we live in. So how do you keep your team engaged? That's a great question. And I would actually say that the team at Stratifyd, we've really built and developed throughout COVID. So it's just been recently that I've started to meet people a lot of the team actually in person. So it's been definitely a lot of career growth and idea generation over the past, 12 or 18 months we've been in this now. But I think, one of the best ways to keep your team engaged, and I think if we're talking about engagement from sort of the work side of things, the project, the metric side of things, is bringing your team into the process, having them be part of the brainstorm, having them be part of the problem solving, the ideation, feeling that they're a part of how we're kind of going about and solving these different challenges. If you are simply kind of crafting your plans in a silo or with just a few people and you're kind of tossing them over the fence for execution, there's not that same level of buy-in. When you are part of the process from the beginning, and those are some of your ideas that are being acted upon, you feel way more ownership and way more accountability to see these things through and to see them be very successful. So I think that, getting them to be part of that process from the start is really, really important. I also think accountability is key. I think it's really easy to be a member of a team and kind of wonder from a day-to-day standpoint, like, how am I really impacting the business? I think everyone on the team should really have ownership of metrics. They should understand how the activities and the tactics and the things that are doing are really leading up to drive business impact. I may be the voice, whether it's on a leadership call on Monday or it's a board meeting every quarter that's kind of communicating like what's happening. But I am very proud to say that I feel like our entire team does feel that they have ownership and accountability in all of the metrics that we're delivering on a annual, quarterly basis.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I definitely can see the ownership piece and how, because that's something I always think about from a TA perspective, right? Like, okay, are we bringing in someone who, in the role that we're asking him to be in, will they be engaged and fulfilled for like a long-term commitment? Like, we certainly don't expect people to be with a company for 40 years, like back in the 1920s, but we don't want people leaving after 90 days either. And so, I'm always thinking about that engagement piece. And I think the ownership is a really good point. How do you, once you get to maybe like a certain threshold with the size of your team, like how do you continue to get the input from everybody without it being too many cooks in the kitchen?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I also think that when you're looking at building your team too, you have to be wary of, the structure. Like, it can't be a very flat team. It needs to be built out. So I have, members of my marketing leadership team that I meet with on a regular basis. And then they have their areas, whether it's in revenue marketing and operations, product and customer marketing, or it's corporate communications and brand, or it's in education and enablement. I'm meeting with them on a regular basis, but I am also empowering them. And my message to them is also make sure you're empowering your teams. I don't want to be involved in every conversation. I want to trust that, no one wants to be micromanaged. I don't want to be a micromanager. So there's got to be that level of trust that you build, within the first, several months of a new job or a new hire. And then I think you've got to trust them, and you've got to let them feel that they have that empowerment to be able to, work on a project or take things, over the finish line. I think that that's just really, really important.
So then the next question in relation to your team that I have is, how do you support them on a day-to-day basis? You being one person, having multiple bodies to be accountable for, whether they're your rock stars and superstars, or they're someone who's really struggling or somewhere in between that. How do you go about supporting them and making them feel like they are, as much of a part of the team as you want them to feel?
Yeah, that's another really great question. There's a couple things there. One is, I always think it's really easy to give people, critical feedback. But I also really, really believe in the power of sharing the positive stuff and giving my team credit. So if I get, if I get a positive response on our leadership team meeting or the board, I immediately share the names of my team members that were a part of that project. It's very important for me to elevate them in the eyes of the leadership or the board that these people were a part of making this happen. They worked on this initiative. They worked very hard. And I think it's, I'm the mouthpiece. I'm the one who is bringing it forward, but these are all the people that really worked hard on it. I want to make sure that they're highlighted and that they're celebrated. I think that also, it's very easy too. You get a text message or you get a Slack message if someone's like, oh, your team did a great job over on this project. I'll ask them, I'll be like, hey, thank you for telling me, but would you mind posting that in my team Slack channel? Or would you send an email to the entire team and let them know your feedback? It's just, if they just tell me if I'm having a busy day, I don't want that positive comment to go off to die.
Right.
So I ask them, to share that as well. One of the other things I think is really important, and I think this has almost become more important in this remote environment, but I don't know if someone else has ever thought of this idea or I'm the only weird person that kind of looks at it this way, but I know that a lot of people out there have probably read or they've heard about this book called like The 5 Love Languages. And it's more of like a partnership book with your significant other. I kind of think that everyone also has their professional love language. There is a way at work that each of your individual team members feel valued. And that comes in the form of a lot of different things. But I think it's important that whether you're managing a team of 20 or you're managing a team of 2, that you learn what those professional love languages are and how you need to approach each one-on-one. How do you need to coach them? How do you need to, communicate critical feedback? How do you need to, do various things with them? But I think just every individual, my head of revenue marketing likes to communicate very differently, than my product marketing lead. And if I go into meetings with them, treating them the same way, it's not going to have that same impact. We're not going to be able to communicate as effectively. The other thing that we've instituted is, we have a team meeting every week. And this is something I've done at a number of companies, but we always end the meeting with team shout outs. So it's not just me. I may start it off, but everybody on the team starts shouting out different members from, revenue marketing, thinking products, thinking education. It's just a nice positive note. And I think it's a really great way for the team to kind of communicate their value and support of other members of the team.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool way to top off a meeting, especially if it was as I'm sure most of your meetings are, very impactful, very useful type meeting, and then go off with some happy feelings.
I hope so sometimes.
Well, yeah, sometimes I'm sure you have to deliver the hard news, but still do it in a good way. So now I'm starting to wonder if I'm the only one who thinks like this, but so like in a nerdy baseball way, I think about team dynamics and putting teams together. Like I can see a field in front of me and I could see like, okay, the different positions and what do I want, based on that scenario, how would I fill in those positions? So like in an ideal world for you, however you want to look at your ideal situation, you told us a little bit about balance being a big key to a team dynamic. Like, what is the ideal team for you? Like what type of superheroes do you want? What type of rock stars do you want? Is it a big team? Is it a small team? Anything coming to mind for all that?
Well, first, I don't think you're the only person that thinks about teams in that way. It is, gosh, balance is it's just so important. And I think, even hiring one person, I will say that I don't love to hire a ton of people immediately at the same time, but pace it out, because I do think personalities and work styles, you can get a good sense of that in interviews, but you add them to the team. How does that change things? Does that change how you would look at a certain role? Wow, I got a really strong leader over here, but maybe they're not as strong in a specific niche topic. And so I might need to edit that job description a little bit and hire that way.
Sure.
But it's really easy to go into job interviews or build out your team wanting to hire people like you. But I look like when I hired the leaders on my team, I was like, I want you to be better in your area than I am. I want to look to you for answers to solving these problems. And I think that that's also very, very important as well. So again, balance, I know we've talked a lot about that, but I think balance beyond just individual contributors and superstar leaders is, I think we all have to be very cognizant of diversity. We want those different viewpoints in your team as well. And so I think that that's something very important we all as leaders and people managers should be looking at.
Yeah, I think one of the most impactful conversations I ever had with you in a work setting was working through a job description, talking about a role that we were hiring for. And you understood, you were like, okay, we need to bring some diversity to our sales team essentially. And how can we do that from the bottom up is, hire, look for, women to bring on to the team. And women in tech, just traditionally don't get opportunities, especially at those high levels, to do things in sales. And so I thought it was just really brilliant and even simple, but also, very cognizant of that diversity piece to say, okay, we bring in a woman at one of these, lower level positions, an associate or whatever you want to call it. And then she has the opportunity in our system, in our organization, to work her way up to potentially an enterprise level, or, who knows, where they're going to go. And I think having a cognizant effort to that is something that most hiring managers don't really take. They say they do, but they don't really do it. And then that falls, on recruiting and kind of just snowflake after snowflake and builds up. And so I just, it's something I've always remembered. And I remember telling my wife about it. And I think it's a really good practical example of a time where, we had a conversation around it and it was really impactful. And that doesn't mean, that we're going to discount, somebody from a different gender or a different background or whatever it is, if they fit what we're looking for. But it is to say, like, okay, let's get out of the traditional mold of what we've been doing, and let's try to see if there's other people who fit what we're trying to build here.
Well, it's even, there's simple things that you can do that I think often sometimes we forget about of, hey, if you've got a new job posting or you're looking for a new role, let's make sure that the women in tech groups know that this position is open, or Black girls who code know that this position is open. There's been tons of studies even on how you write job descriptions in a way that is, women, gosh, I have to find the study. I believe it was Harvard Business Review, but it was, women tend to go through a job description and, check every single box. And if they don't check all of them, they won't apply. But men tend to, oh, I got 3 out of the 10 that they've listed. I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and see what happens. So knowing that is how job descriptions are approached, what can we do from a leadership, a company standpoint, a recruiting standpoint, to make sure that just everyone feels the opportunity to put their hat in the ring and to try out for any kind of role that they dream of.
Yeah, I think that's awesome and really, really powerful. So what, my last question then, in terms of the team dynamics and just how you lead, I'm asking you, I guess, maybe to dig a little bit deeper here with some challenges, but how do you work around challenges? Because you're going to have them, right? Like you could ignore them, I guess, but challenges are part of the role. So how do you go about tackling those?
Yeah, I think you just got to go after them. And honestly, I think the remote world that we've been living in for the past 18 months has surfaced a whole new level of challenges. Before then, there was the challenge of, wow, no one likes this, but as a boss or a manager or leader, there's those moments where you've got to deliver the uncomfortable criticism, job performance improvement type things. And no one likes to be the bearer of bad news. But I think that one thing that you can do along the way, even before you have to be that bearer of bad news, is care about your employees. If they know that you have your best intentions at heart, it's going to make delivering that critique or, hey, I think you might have wanted to try this a little bit differently. They're going to take that news completely less personal, because they understand that you are invested in their success and that you want to see them improve. And you're not trying to pick on them because, they did something that maybe, could have been done a little bit differently, but that you really want to see them get better. So those are, the old school challenges. I think remote has been, in some ways, very incredible. In other ways, exhaustive, Zoom fatigue. And it's also been very trying. I think it's been fantastic in the sense that a remote has given so many companies this opportunity to expand their hiring pool. It's not just been about, wow, who's going to be able to, make that 30-minute drive into the office, but you've really been able to expand and I think open up opportunities to a lot more groups of people. It's trying in that you have to be so much more acutely aware of what's going on with your teams. And that's what, we have a policy on my team, cameras on. If it's important enough to have a meeting that your camera needs to be on, I need to be able to visually, I'm not sitting with you, so I need to visually try to understand, how is this information going across? Are you understanding me? Do you not like this idea? Maybe you're having a really bad day and it's an opportunity for me to check in on you and see if there's a way that I can help. And that's harder to do over a camera than it is, when you're in person day to day. So you've got to be really honed in on, how is the mood of the team? Are individual people feeling good? Are they feeling valued? Are they having a rough time? COVID introduced this situation where it wasn't just working from home. It was working from home with your child that might not be feeling good, with dogs that are in the background, with newborn babies or parents that you're taking care of. And now all of a sudden you are dealing with all that and trying to work. So it's really just given us all these new challenges, but I think as leaders that we've had to really be more perceptive, be more understanding and kind and empathetic, and try to lead through that way. I think that's one of the biggest things, but I've just tried to tackle them. I bring in my leaders quite a bit, try to get their opinions on how we can do things in a better way, take feedback from the team. I also try to do meetings. I do skip meetings. Some people call them skip meetings, where you kind of meet with your leadership's teams, so that they still feel that they have a connection in a one-on-one environment, with the leader of their department. So those are often some ways too to kind of understand a little bit more, especially now in this remote world, what's going on in their minds.
So a lot goes on in your day-to-day as a leader. How do you take care of yourself, knowing that in order for you to be the best leader that you can be, you need to be healthy mentally, physically, emotionally? So how do you go about, just on a day-to-day basis, some of the general things that you're doing to make sure that you're ready to handle the challenges, handle the excitement, do everything that's involved in your role?
I don't think I figured out the perfect way to do that. There's definitely a plan, and I think some days that plan stays on schedule and some days it doesn't. Exercise, I think, is so hugely important. I have a Peloton bike. I've been a remote employee at my last company and at Stratifyd for over 5 years now. So kind of combating that remote environment has been a priority of mine for a while. So I love it when it works out in the morning. If I'm able to get a Peloton, bike ride in or some kind of workout in, or if not, I will try to block 30 minutes during the day at some point. I think it was Legally Blonde. Reese Witherspoon said she was like, endorphins make people happy and happy people don't kill people. And I've always just kind of stuck with that. I'm like, all right, this is, I'm going to get my endorphins in today. I'm going to be a better human being. I'm going to be a better listener. I'm going to be a better advocate. So I definitely think that that's super important. And I think and I know that this is really hard for people, kind of depending on your living situation, but I do think you have to make a cognizant effort to, whether it's shutting your office doors at night or unplugging your laptop and sticking it under some pillows so you don't hear any dings, but you've got to start to really try to create a separation from, your work life and your home life. COVID especially has just, those lines are so blurred right now. And I think especially when we got started, people were just not stopping working. It was going into the weekends and you were working 7 days a week before you even realized it. So you've got to find that cutoff point. And whether it's, like I said, shutting the doors or closing the laptop or shutting Slack off for the night and just taking that break for yourself and going and reading a book or Netflix binging with your family.
Such an important reminder, and something that I do. The door in my office is, well, it's usually open, but it's far enough away. It's like the last room down the hallway. So I never venture down here, after a certain amount of time every single day, just to get away. Cause I was doing the remote thing like you too. I'm on this, I think this is year 5 for me as well. So yeah, totally get it. Great reminder though. And Meredith, I know
oh, sorry. No, I was just gonna say we used to be able to drive home and, and there was that differentiation, that delineation. Yeah. Now it's 2 steps that way.
Yeah. And even that drive home could have been like your decompress time, like, your me time, that's so important. Like I tell people, like selfish, yeah, like be selfish. Like you have to take care of yourself. Like it's hard.
Okay to be selfish. It is. And I think that's important too. It's okay for, like you said, taking that me time. You've got to prioritize it.
Yeah, for sure. And I know we're getting close on time, so I want to see, before I let you go, is there anything that we haven't talked about or any wisdom that you want to leave us with before we let you go today?
I don't know if it's wisdom. I think it's more of a learning that I think I've just had over the years. And if I can, save anybody else time of trying to figure this out down the road, but leadership, building, coaching teams, it is something that it can't be an afterthought. Sometimes there's, I want to have a great team. And it's just kind of this thing that's hanging out there. It's got to be a priority. It's got to be something that you're always thinking about. It's got to be something that, I won't say never, because that's probably not true, but I almost never miss my one-on-one meetings with my team members. That is their time. It's very important to them. And that's just one way that I try to prioritize it. I think that if anybody out there who is really looking to, be that leader someday or improve their current skill set, I think if you can think about ways that you can make it a priority for yourself, that it'll just start to become natural and something that you're always thinking about and you're wanting to do better for your team on.
Awesome way to end what I knew was going to be an awesome conversation, but I'm so glad that we were able to find some time in your busy schedule. And thank you, Meredith, for taking the time to do this and to share everything. It's really been a pleasure having you on.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. It was my pleasure.